Why do you have to keep ICE away from polling stations? If illegal aliens aren't voting, then what would ICE people there be worried about ICE for? There's nothing to worry about. So that tells me everything I need to know.
A Democrat forced the director of ICE to say that they will not interfere in elections, and given everything that's been going on recently, it's a powerful moment. We've got the clip, we've got some in-depth analysis, and we've got jokes. So make sure you subscribe and stick around to the end for at least 2 out of 3 of those things. So yeah, Trump's poorly conceived authoritarian greatest hits albums continued, and people in his camp have been saying they're considering deploying ICE agents to polling stations, presumably seeing the writing on the wall, which is of course the whole MAGA bowel movement taking the biggest L in the midterms ever seen in history ever. Of course, simpletons don't understand why this is a clear sign of authoritarian overreach. In the mind of a very simple person, things are black and white, binary. On and off, ICE are good, foreigners are bad. Trump is good, Dems are bad. ICE stop illegals. They don't interfere with anyone else, of course. Illegals are always trying to vote in American elections. So why not have them at polling stations to stop that happening? And no, that's not just an assumption based on a stereotype about MAGA's mental capacity. These people literally say this openly online. I mean, look at these clips.
Hey, fam, quick question. I keep hearing all these senators and congressmen and all these people saying, oh, we got to keep ICE away from polling stations. Why? Why do you have to keep ICE away from polling stations? If illegal aliens aren't voting, then what would ICE people there be worried about ICE for? There's nothing to worry about. So that tells me everything I need to know. You have illegal aliens voting, and you don't want them to be scared off by ICE. Come on, man. You people tell on yourself all the time. You talk too much, and you give away your whole game. That's why you're so predictable.
Imagine being told you talk too much by a man who's reached his advanced age and understands almost nothing of the world and has been talking for, dear God, almost a minute and has said basically nothing other than, I'm a big fat dummy.
You think you're outsmarting people and you're telling them everything you're doing. Never have a Democrat for a rat partner. They'll rat you out.
Never have a Democrat for a rat partner. They'll rat you out. What? I think I just regressed. I think I just lost years and brain cells listening to that shit. Look, this is the problem with logic like this is these people don't understand why things might be bad until it happens to them. They never will. They don't have empathy, emotional intelligence, comprehension of the world around them. Because it's the same thing as being like, well, if you're not doing anything weird in your bedroom, let me see. Show me your cock. If your cock isn't covered in sores, I want to see your cock. Get your cock out and show it to me if it's not covered in sores. It's like there are things we don't need to prove, and and they can't conceive of the idea that maybe there could be a third issue. Maybe the issue isn't as black and white, again, not as binary as stop illegals voting or don't stop illegals voting. It's like maybe there could be a nefarious reason for sending heavily armed thugs in jackboots who've literally shot American citizens to death for nothing, illegally, to voting stations, especially when this is very openly Trump's Gestapo. It's he is the one that has funded and made this agency what it is. Like, imagine if Barack Obama had formed an agency called like Obama Cares or something, and then they he sent them to hang out around polling stations carrying guns. They're like, obviously then they'd understand the issue. That's the problem with these people. I think that's the biggest difference between the left and the right, is that people on the left can generally, not always, but I think for a greater example rate, can understand the idea of, oh, what would this be like in reverse? What would it be like if the shoe was on the other foot? These people cannot understand that. The shoe is only ever on their foot. I mean, there's been studies done about this. There's been studies done that have shown that people who tend to vote right-wing have lower, signs of empathy. They have lower emotional intelligence usually. They usually rate a lot higher for anxiety and fear. I mean, these are things that kind of sound obvious when you think about it, but there's actual scientific backing to it. Anyway, I could talk forever about why maybe it's not a good thing to have a reckless, unruly force that has been shooting Americans dead showing up at polling stations, especially when it's clearly a desperate attempt to try and swing the vote that, they're going to lose so fucking hard on. But life's too short, and if you're here, you probably already understand what I'm talking about. What's more interesting is the fact that, honestly, this completely surprises me, but the director of ICE himself has already said that's not going to happen. I mean, for context, we should watch the clip, so check this out.
Thank you for being here. I personally think that Secretary Noem should be here. You want the big job, you have the big accountability, and we should be seeing the Secretary of Homeland Security coming in front of the American people and certainly the Oversight Committee when we have such existential issues about the deployment of federal force in our country going on. But you are here in her place. And I think, you know, if we rewound the tape to a year and a half ago or a year plus ago, you had a lot of Americans who felt very strongly that if you are here illegally, especially if you were involved in any kind of criminal activity, you should be deported, right? You need strong borders. I'm a CIA officer. You need strong borders. We need an immigration policy that allows us to do that, but that enforcement would have been something that the average American supported. But the conduct of ICE in places like Minneapolis has now boomeranged to the point where people say, well, look, I was for...
This is what's really insane, is that some Margaret online try and be like, well, this kind of shit was happening, you know, always. You just only care about it because the left-wing media is showing. It's like, no, it's like, no, nobody was getting shot. No citizens were getting shot in the streets beforehand. People weren't being demanded papers. They didn't have, when we'll go into this later, but they didn't have, you know, widespread violations of the Fourth Amendment. It's like, no, this is very different. If you're a fool, then maybe you can't see the difference, but this is a very clearly different thing.
Enforcement, but I'm not for what looks like authoritarian style you know, federal goons on our streets. And that's not coming from Democrats. That's coming from, in Michigan, you know, the state of Michigan voted for Donald Trump. You're coming from people who say, look, I'm all for enforcement, but I'm not for trampling basic rights. And Americans have an internal barometer for what looks and smells authoritarian, and whether it's shooting someone who's unarmed or pepper spraying kids or picking people up as they walk into Target and checking their papers, that is an internal barometer that we all have, that you have crossed. And we're here today, and all this firestorm is here, not because of people on the ground, but because of your behavior in ICE. And, you know, I think when you extrapolate out and you listen to what the president and his cabinet are saying, I have to ask about our 2026 elections, okay? The president says we should federalize our elections, even though the US Constitution was written by our founders to give that power to the states so that we would never have a president who took too much power and tried to become a king.
Right, but let me just say, as MAGA, what you don't understand is, you know, the founding fathers, they had the right idea. You know, they were like, well, we should maybe not let federal do the voting in case you get a dictator. But now what's happening is we have 32 dictators in the Democrat state. We have individual dictators all over the country, and one beautiful, brave man, Donald Trump, and we need to make sure that, you know, the election's not stolen, because there's a mountain of no proof saying that this happened last time. I'm sorry, it's bigly man of tears.
He's tried to get voter rolls, including in my state. He's complained that elections aren't free and fair. In 2020, he came up with a playbook to deploy federal law enforcement around polling places, and the White House spokeswoman will not rule that out as of a month and a half ago. So I have to ask Mr. Lyons, do you believe that ICE has the authority to be deployed to U.S. polling places around the country?
So, ma'am, we're civil. Obviously, we do civil enforcement and criminal law enforcement. There's no reason for us to deploy to a polling facility.
Strike me down. I mean, this is genuinely, this surprises me, right? Am I not alone in being like, this is surprising? We'll talk about this later, but...
President of the United States gets Kristi Noem on the phone, and she gets you on the phone, and she says, we've heard there's a problem in Georgia or in Michigan or somewhere else.
There's a problem. People are voting for Democrats. Get down there.
I need you to go and physically deploy around polling locations. You will say no.
There's no reason for us to deploy, ma'am.
Well, then you should say no, right?
Yes, but just point of clarification. Homeland Security investigations, we do investigate voter fraud, which we've made several arrests, most recently a high-profile one in Massachusetts. So just later on...
That's very different than the physical intimidation.
I just didn't want you to say that we don't do anything with voter. I just want you to know we do that criminal aspect.
That's fine. I'm talking about something that I think would be extraordinary in American history, which is uniformed and masked ICE agents encircling polling places. And it's not fantasy, it's not made up. These are things that the president and his cabinet have suggested. They've suggested invoking the Insurrection Act, which would allow active duty military to do the very same thing. So this isn't, someone who thinks the sky is falling. The president and his cabinet are suggesting. So you're going to be the guy standing in the breach.
There's no reason, like I say, ma'am, there's no reason for you to use ICE officers in that.
Great. Well, I hope that in the privacy of that meeting, when that comes down and the president feels like he's going to lose the midterm elections, that you don't buckle. Because I think our democracy literally is dependent on it.
Damn, that was powerful. She's good. Now that's a supremely interesting clip. Interesting, as in also depressing and terrifying, because this is the world we live in. But it is interesting. I acknowledge that she did give him a chance to say absolutely that would never happen, or say no, I would not. Instead, he would said there would be no reason for that. Those are different things. In a way, it is like sort of a politician's answer. At the same time, considering the entire political environment we live in, this surprises me. Like, I genuinely would have thought, considering everything that's been going on and how blatantly and openly the Trump regime and Trump cronies have until this point just been ransacking the Constitution, doing what they want and just saying to people, deal with it. That response to me is surprising. And part of the reason this is interesting is that Todd Leon's the director of ICE isn't some like stoic, level-headed holdout. Some guy appointed by a sane president in times gone past who's like kept his head down and secretly kept the ship steady. He was appointed by Kristi Noem in 2025, and he's been at the center of a few controversies already. A Minneapolis judge had to threaten to hold him in contempt of court to get ICE to follow a simple legal order to release someone they had in custody, after weeks of them flouting direct legal orders from federal judges. And this guy is not an angel. To get a real sense of who this man is, you only have to look at his Wikipedia page. Check this out. This is a direct quote from this lovely human being. "We need to get better at treating this like a business, where this mass deportation operation is something like you would see and say, like Amazon, just like Amazon, trying to get your Prime delivery within 24 hours. So trying to figure out how to do that with human beings. It's like they said the horrible part out loud and then doubled down on it. They're like, we're going to talk about human beings like they're cattle, not even cattle. They'll talk about them like they're just objects, just bits of cardboard. But they're also human beings. I'm aware of what they are, and I do not care." He said that in 2025, and it's an interesting choice of language to say running it like a business, given a very recent news story about the U.S. government spending $40 million to deport 300 people to countries they weren't even born in, third-party nations. Could this be that government waste Marco has been crying about? No. Better fire another couple of 100,000 senior public servants providing, crucial logistics and services. Pointless stuff like that. Speaking of business, what about the other recent story that the Trump regime was also hiring the private plane of a billionaire donor at $500,000 a pop to fly Palestinians in America back to Palestine, where they were dropped off, quote, like animals on the side of the road. I'm assuming that's good business too. It's certainly good business if you donate a cool milli to Trump's campaign and in return he hires your private jet for deportation flights at a cost greatly higher than the regular cost of deportation flights, bankrolled by the American public. Q Marga going, "Well, I can't hear you over the loud sound of the swab being drained." That's bad, but Leon's is infamous for something even worse. Check out this nugget. So in May 2025, he offered a secret memorandum that was leaked by a whistleblower. Shit's serious when somebody's like, the public needs to see this is terrible. The memo authorized ICE officers to forcibly enter people's homes without a judge's warrant, stating, although the US Department of Homeland Security has not historically relied on administrative warrants alone, so as it explains below, administrative warrant is one that is generated and signed by ICE agents, not approved by federal district court or a judge. It's just ICE agent says, "I sign my own warrant." It's like a cop being like, "I give myself permission to shoot that guy, yeehaw!" It's not the same thing at all. It is a bullshit warrant. Usually, it's only been used to arrest people in public places, and only judicial warrants could authorize ICE agents to enter private residences. The practice described by the memo is likely, as in almost certainly definitely is, a violation of the Fourth Amendment, which requires a warrant issued by a judge to authorize physical intrusion into private residencies. The sort of shit Republicans and libertarians used to say they care about. So although DHS has not historically relied on administrative warrants alone to arrest aliens subject to final orders of removal in their place of residence, remove the part in brackets saying because it's illegal, the DHS Office of the General Counsel has recently determined that the US Constitution is toilet paper. No, wait. The US Constitution, the Immigration and Nationality Act, and the immigration regulations do not prohibit relying on administrative warrants for this purpose. Oh, that's great. I've decided that the US Constitution doesn't prohibit me from stealing money now, taking my neighbor's shit. Cool. Yeah, I've decided that. Oh, no, sorry, I've determined it. If you use the word determined, that's even more professional and legalese. I have determined that I'm allowed to go up to Trump and poke him in the eye. And the Constitution, it's the Fifth Amendment, so it's cool. All that is to say, I do find it incredibly interesting that he's declaring pretty definitively, semi-strongly, that ICE has no reason to be at polling stations. He doesn't seem like a man of principles who would feel the need to bullshit and posture in front of cameras. Nor, more crucially, has anyone in the current Trump government acted like they are touchable. Until now, ICE is withdrawing from Minneapolis, Republicans are resigning en masse, Democrats are taking seats in deep red, deep South areas. Perhaps these people see the writing on the wall and they can sort of smell the distant fumes of accountability wafting their way. Time will tell, and so will we, so subscribe to our channel. I'm British Chris, and this is Raw America.